Uh-huh. I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to a Friday edition of the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast. And finally, for the first time since the legal tampering period began, we are starting to see a little bit of a slowdown on news. Maybe everybody's watching the NCAA tournament, but we will touch on a couple of things that have come up in the interim. And then we will be looking at running backs from the class of 2023, which some interesting names, some interesting situations to come here. Dennis, you got a nice break there at the end of January. I am 2 days away, or 36 hours away from taking off to Las Vegas with my wife. I'm ready.
I bet you are, man. It was nice going to Tahiti after starting this renovation on February 18th. So we got back home from Tahiti on February 10th, and on a week later, we started renovating our kitchen.
See, we kind of did it the other way. We've had a few projects that are almost done. We got our deck redone, which was just in time for it to hopefully, last weekend we got a foot and a half of snow. I'm hoping that was kind of the last hurrah.
So here's the thing, though. You're talking about getting stuff done, and I'm having to do stuff. Not the same thing.
We had to go buy all this
night till about 1:30 in the morning, running a jackhammer, taking up ceramic tile.
That's my idea of a nightmare.
Yeah, a nightmare if you're not sleeping.
I lived through that when we redid we were the genius people that decided to replace the flooring and paint the interior of the entire house all at the same time. So it was. You always had to move a temporary setup every night and find a little place where you could lay out your bedroll.
Yeah, we have we had painting done today. So they did the ceilings and the walls in the new dining room kitchen, hallway, the interior, the pantry, and all that. So that was good. We pushed back the delivery of the cabinets to Monday. So those will come in Monday. They should probably be installed by Wednesday, I think. And then we'll have the countertop people out. We're still deciding. We haven't bought floor, so right now we're just on a concrete slab. We're going back and forth about what flooring we're gonna get, and by we I mean her.
Well, good luck with that. The way I did mine was she picked it out, and as long as she didn't pick something that made me sad or that I thought that I couldn't live with,
yeah, she's gonna get whatever floor she wants.
That's why even you can't really tell here because she has that white thing, but my office is now pink.
Yeah,
so, there you go. Well, let's take a look. We have a couple pieces of news. Dennis, the Browns signed D'Onta Foreman, so they still have Jerome Ford. They had Pierre Strong. I believe they added somebody else that we thought was just going to be kind of a special team. Nyheim Hines, probably a special teamer. Foreman, not really a special teamer. Do you think this is just some depth, maybe a little bit of concern that Nick Chubb might have to ease his way back in? Or some people were speculating that in the wake of Jerry Jeudy's contract, they were going to release Nick Chubb, which
I don't know that they're going to release Nick Chubb. It feels to me like, he's been a company guy all all through his career. He's never been banging the table. You've got to use me more in this way or that way. He didn't get mad when they brought somebody in for him to share time. All he did was just produce. So it may be more of a nod to, well, if he's not ready, we want somebody to pair with Jerome Ford that maybe packs a little more punch than Ford does. They don't have Kareem Hunt anymore. I was hoping Foreman might go somewhere where he could get a shot to play more. But, I just think he's a feel-good story coming back. He's like the poster boy for coming back from an Achilles injury. But also, I guess I don't blame Dante Foreman for going somewhere where they expect it to be a winning team. There's no shame in being the backup on a winning team that you think may have a chance to compete for a Super Bowl. I think that's dubious based on Deshaun Watson's performance as of this point in Cleveland, but they've got a lot of pieces and a great defense. So
probably more just an indictment of Pierre Strong, because last year they ended up having to bring in Hunt to kind of pair with, and maybe Pierre Strong doesn't even make the roster when they go to cut downs. It's not like they invested heavily in him or we saw anything incredible.
Yeah, they still got John Kelly, so they've got deep depth on the team that knows the system. Maybe Strong. Strong was, I think, more of a pass catcher. I think, he's got bruiser size. I think he's more of a pass catcher. Hines, I agree, he's going to be a special teamer. And I think Foreman has a chance to, and Hines can catch the ball out of the backfield too. So if they're going to go with 4 backs and have one inactive, Foreman's likely to be the inactive once Chubb is back. Maybe he surpasses Jerome Ford, but I think Hines it'll be Hines, Chubb, Ford, and Foreman over Strong and Kelly.
Well, in other kind of low-level signings, Paris Campbell, I had some hopes that maybe he'd be able to be featured a little bit with the Giants last year, but didn't really happen. He's no longer in New York, moves over to the Eagles. So between him and the Eagles signed somebody else.
Devontae Parker.
That's right, Devontae Parker. So, seems like some depth moves to me, but in terms of fantasy, this makes me think that Paris Campbell isn't necessarily somebody I'm trying to roster.
They've got him listed as the backup to Devonta Smith in the slot. And that's primarily because Devontae Parker can't play in the slot. Right now, I think it's a Paris Campbell, Devontae Parker wide receiver 3 duo. The other guys they've got there, Joseph Ngata, Herb Griffin, Britton Covey, who's mostly a special teamer. So they don't have a ton of depth. And while Paris Campbell has some ability, he can't stay healthy. And even I like you, he was a guy I was scooping up like in best ball last year, hoping like he went to New York where they needed somebody to step up.
Well, and he had finally a pretty decent season in 2022 with the Colts, gave me probably even more false hope.
Yeah, so I'm out.
A little bit of sad, or distressing news. It's been kind of a quiet offseason for the Lions, who, were one bad second half away from maybe making it to the Super Bowl. I think we both still have some high hopes for them. Cam Sutton, their cornerback, currently wanted. I think it was battery, potentially facing a battery charge. Concerning at all, could be a little bit of a distraction too for this team.
Well, so that's the issue with Detroit is their defense. So yes, it's concerning from that point. It's been speculated that they are going to that they were going to go defense in the draft and potentially a cornerback.
Well, it looks like they just released him too.
Oh, okay. Well, looks like things aren't looking up for Cam Sutton.
Yep, I guess it was late Thursday. They went ahead and released him. He's facing a domestic battery charge by strangulation and third-degree felony.
Yeah. Well, that's not great, Bob.
No, I mean, he was a 17-game starter, and you're right. Like, corner, they have not had good luck. I liked a couple of years ago when they drafted Jeff Okudah, but that didn't quite pan out, and he's now on to his third team.
I think he's in Atlanta, or did they let him go?
No, he moved on. Houston, yeah, he went from Atlanta to Houston. So probably, I guess, their offense still seems to be in decent shape with the pieces that they have coming back. So you figure maybe a defense-heavy draft?
I would speculate. I think we went edge and then cornerback and edge for them.
Yeah, they may.
I took Keon Coleman in the first round, didn't I?
Yeah, you did. That may be more of a luxury pick now.
Yeah,
because their secondary they struggled with, I thought, even last year. So
yeah. Brian Branch played well, but he's kind of a slot guy now. Their safeties played pretty good, but
and they had CJ Chauncey Gardner, who has now gone back to the Eagles. So
So they're going to need to invest in the backfield and maybe go for an edge guy. Nothing makes a defensive backfield look good like a great pass rush.
So the last thing, we're getting some competition committee news. A couple of pieces. They're looking at banning the hip drop tackle, which is something that's now supported also by NFL officials. They're also looking at some potential changes to kickoffs, and I saw that they were mulling some potential changes to onside kicks, maybe looking at doing a 4th and 15 play or something. And in probably even a more surprising move, they've decided they are in no way going to outlaw or change the tush push. So Dennis, what of these potential changes or not changes hits you the most?
Well, I'm all for reducing the opportunity to have an injury in football, and the hip drop tackle. Unfortunately, from a defensive perspective, it's gonna increase offense. We'll have to change our perception of what a good defense is, because if you're running behind somebody and you're grabbing a hold of them, or you're coming from the side, oftentimes it's you can't hit them high. You don't want to hit them in the head, and you don't want to hit them in the knees. Now you can't grab them around the waist and drag them down. So there'll definitely be a learning curve, but I'm all for making the game safer. Kickoffs, it's the same thing. I know, they instituted the new rules, and kickoffs got safer because people stopped returning the ball. I don't know what you want to do. It's you got to give something.
I think what most surprising to me was they're not going to do anything with the tush push, because it seemed like when we were coming to the end of the season, that was a foregone conclusion.
Well, with that, it's more a function of, it isn't like they're the only team that can do it, they being the Eagles. And
although they do,
you can blow the play dead at any time. They can determine if it's been stopped. It's a weird play. Am I a big fan of it? No, but mostly because I often roster Philly running backs, and I would like to, it would have.
Well, and
seen DeAndre Swift get some more touchdowns last year.
With Saquon Barkley back there and with Jason Kelce not up front, maybe they won't do it as much. It seemed like toward the end of the season and in the playoffs, like in that game against Dallas, and then the playoffs, they didn't always nail it every time quite as successfully. And other teams tried to do it. Buffalo was trying to do it quite a bit, it seemed like, in the playoffs, and I didn't think that was always super successful either. Well, let's move on. Look at the running backs. We did quarterbacks on Tuesday. That was interesting running
That
backs.
was something, wasn't it?
It really was. We start with Bijan Robinson. Went in the first round, pick number 8 to the Atlanta Falcons. I think we were a little surprised about the landing spot because of how much it crushed some of our thoughts about Tyler Algier. We'll get to him in a minute, but 16 games as a starter, played 17 games, 214 carries, 976 yards, 4 touchdowns for Robinson. Also caught 58 passes for 487 yards and 4 touchdowns. I think he potentially takes even a bigger step forward and probably shares the backfield a little bit less with Algier now that Arthur Smith is no longer there. To me, he's still a top tier RB1.
Yeah, he's in Dynasty. He's up there as RB1 or 2 with Breece Hall, pick your poison kind of thing with Christian McCaffrey's age. He finished his RB12 last year. He was really handcuffed by Fartiardi down there in Atlanta with Smith gone and Kirk Cousins being a good quarterback. It should open that offense up. The biggest downside might be that if Cousins gets hot passing the ball with Pitts and London and Mooney, it could take away some opportunity from Bijan. But I would expect the running back touches to slant heavier towards him and away from Algier. As much as I liked Algier coming out that year, he's really a change of pace backup guy now. So Bijan, I know Gibbs finished ahead of him last year, but it wouldn't surprise me if Bijan finished top 5 this year.
Yeah, and I think if he would have gotten more touchdowns, he probably would have been there because he actually ended up with more receptions than Gibbs, and I think he had slightly more rushing yards, just he didn't have the explosive plays.
Yeah.
Speaking of Gibbs, was the other first round running back. Might be quite some time before we see 2 running backs go in the first round again. He went at pick 12 to Detroit, 182 carries, 945 yards, 10 touchdowns, averaged 5.2 yards per carry. Started 3 games, appeared in 15, so he was a little more durable than I think some people made it out to be at times. 71 targets, caught 52 for 316. Only 1 passing touchdown reception. I would have figured a few more. We had a couple of near misses there. David Montgomery's still there. I think Montgomery is still kind of the pounding back, but we saw him start to pick up more even when Montgomery was present down the stretch. They used both those guys as weapons. I like Gibbs, probably in the RB1 conversation too.
Yeah, his ability to run the ball in conjunction with his receiving ability is just phenomenal. Well, he was RB8 last year. I do think him and Bijan will kind of make a little swap there. Bijan will pass him. I feel like Gibbs is still good for a top 10 spot. Him and Montgomery split the touches pretty evenly, though Monty only had 24 targets versus Gibbs' 71. And what Montgomery had about 38 more carries than Gibbs. Gibbs was just a lot more explosive. Gibbs had 10 rushing touchdowns. For a guy that you thought, Montgomery's going to be the Thunder, he's going to get that. But Montgomery, when Gibbs would get the ball down there, Montgomery was giving him the no, you stay in there. Yeah, it's okay. He was being a great teammate and saying, look, you got us down here. You go get that touchdown. He wasn't like going, oh, well, we're inside the 10. You got to come out and I'm coming in. So I think we'll see a little bit more volume on Gibbs' side just because he is so much more explosive. But I still expect they'll be less of a 50-50 and more of probably a 55-45. I wouldn't expect it to go, a huge split over Gibbs' direction. But I like Gibbs. I'm comfortable with him in my top 10.
Next up, the third running back off the board, second round, 52 overall, was Zach Charbonnet. A guy people liked going into the draft. He ends up getting snagged by Seattle. Not an ideal landing spot because they have Ken Walker. He appeared in the 16 games, started 2, 108 carries, 462 yards, only one touchdown, 4.3 yards per carry. Saw 40 targets, caught 33 for 209 yards. They're in the midst of a transition a little bit in Seattle. Walker is still there, and we figure probably still the lead back. They may not be as run-heavy a system with their new offensive coordinator and with all the passing game weapons they have. This leaves me feeling, we talked about after the draft that the Charbonnet pick was probably good from an NFL perspective, but maybe a nightmare for fantasy. I feel like that nightmare might be deepening in year two.
So Charbonnet really needed to go somewhere where he was, I don't want to say uncontested because there's not a lot of uncontested jobs at the running back position. But Walker was a high draft pick, and he's a dynamic runner. Walker had twice as many carries. And you think, okay, well, we saw that with Gibbs and David Montgomery. Well, as it turned out, Walker only had 3 fewer targets than Montgomery and 4 fewer catches, and Walker was the only one of them that had a receiving touchdown. So while I do think that Walker will still be the lead back there, if Charbonnet can, it depends on how he fits in this new offense. If he fits better than Walker, then maybe we see a little bit of an uptick. But right now, if I had to roster just one of these guys, I'm going to roster Walker.
Yeah, and the real bummer is I think it hurts the fantasy value of both of them. I still like Walker better, but before the draft last offseason, he felt like a potential RB1. Now I wouldn't even think about it. If Charbonnet's rookie season was a little bit of a bummer, a massive bummer for the fourth running back off the board, which was Kendre Miller, who went in the third round, pick number 71, went to New Orleans. We thought maybe there was an opportunity, especially with Alvin Kamara suspended early in the season. But Miller was just pretty much a non-factor, struggled to even get on the field. Only appeared in 8 games, 41 carries, 156 yards, 1 touchdown, only averaged 3.8 yards per carry, caught 10 passes for 117 yards. Alvin Kamara is still there. Jamal Williams is still there. The good news is, with Clint Kubiak, maybe you have a more robust running game, but it's really hard to feel confident in Kendre Miller's role in fantasy value.
In reality, Miller, that was Taysom Hill's carries, not Kendre Miller's. My bad. I was going to say Miller only had 20 carries less than Jamal Williams, but skip that. That was Taysom Hill. It feels almost like it was Miller got banged up. If I remember correctly, he got banged up in training camp and didn't have a chance to really step into the Alvin Kamara role while Kamara was out on suspension. And then when Kamara came back, he came back on fire and was playing really well. Jamal Williams didn't have a great season, but I think if you've looked at Williams' history, you probably weren't expecting it. He's kind of an every other year kind of guy. It's like the Matt Ryan.
Which bodes even worse for Miller in year 2.
Right. So, he's a deep stash. It's not looking good. He was RB 85 last year. I don't expect a whole lot of progress. Can he get up into the 60s? Yeah, maybe. We'll see. They lost. Michael Thomas is gone. They've finally changed offensive coordinators, so maybe Kubiak gets some stuff going with some clever stuff, and if the offense gets to clicking, then maybe Miller gets an opportunity. And there is something to be said for I've got a year under my belt now. I've learned what it means to be a professional.
The thing is, though, too, suddenly the NFC South has become a pretty top-heavy division. I expect there are going to be a lot of shootouts and passing. Because Tampa Bay's defense has taken a hit, but they still have quite a few offensive pieces. The Falcons' offense should be wheels up. So I don't know if that'll work in Miller's favor or not, because Kamara is a pretty good pass catcher as well. Next up,
statement.
Also taken in the third round, pick number 81 was Tyjae Spears, went to the Tennessee Titans, which seemed like he was just going to purely be a handcuff behind Derrick Henry. And for the most part, that's probably fairly accurate, but played in all 17 games, was remarkably healthy, started one game, saw 100 carries, 453 yards, 2 touchdowns, averaged 4.5 yards per carry, caught 52 passes for 385 yards and a touchdown. Henry's gone, so it was looking like maybe a little bit of wheels up for Spears, and then they signed Tony Pollard to a 3-year deal. Pollard also is a runner, but a great pass catcher. I think Spears, probably what impresses me the most when you look back on it, is that he was such a big part of the passing game. I still think, maybe RB3, RB4 value. I feel like there's going to be a split, but you've got to feel like Pollard's probably still the lead there.
So I think Pollard is coming in perceived as the lead, but I don't think Pollard has the explosiveness that Spears provides. I think that at the end of the season, it's going to, the overall numbers are going to look to favor Pollard a little bit. But I think as the season goes on, we're going to see Tyjae Spears' production pick up because he's just a more explosive back at this point in his career. I don't think Tony Pollard, I know he was coming off the injury last year, but we saw when given the opportunity to be the guy, we saw that he's best as the second guy.
Yeah, I still think they're going to mix together. I don't know that I agree that Spears is the more explosive player. I think if Pollard wasn't out there on first and second downs last year, he would that was the role that he played in Dallas. That's what made him look like such a great potential. That's what got him to be RB10 in 2022 was his big explosive plays in the passing game and the running game, being able to be a change of pace guy.
I get it, but I still think Spears is more explosive even than that version of Tony Pollard.
Yeah. We'll have to agree to disagree about that one.
It's okay. I've got a lot of friends that are wrong.
Next up, taken third round, pick 84, Devon Achane, who went to the Miami Dolphins, and he was nothing but explosion. He got limited a little bit with injuries, only appeared in 11 games, started 4. Only 103 carries, but he parlayed that into 800 yards and 8 touchdowns, 7.8 yards per carry, caught 27 passes for 197 yards and 3 more touchdowns. So yes, on 130 touches, he scored 11 touchdowns for Miami. He was fantasy gold when he was in there, but you couldn't always rely on him. They still have Mostert, Jeff Wilson, probably 75 other guys potentially in that backfield. I like Achane, but I'm probably only willing to go as high as in the RB2 range in Dynasty. How do you feel?
It's a conundrum because he provides some boom, and I still have questions about his ability to handle volume, but I think he showed he doesn't need a lot of volume to be productive. Now, does that carry over into year 2? He missed 5 games last year. He didn't play 6 games.
He missed 6 games.
The first game.
Well, and he was only in partial in a couple. I remember him coming back, and you throw him in your lineup, and he got 2 snaps, and they're like, Achane's out for the rest of the game.
Yeah, weeks 2 and 10, he scored less than 2 points in each of those games. But man, when he was on, he was putting up points. He had a 51-point game, 4 other games over 20 points. He had a 17-point game.
I mean, that averaging almost 8 yards per carry is insane.
To think that that's going to continue is like makes us insane. But I don't know how much you can bet against it. If I'm Mike McDaniel, I've got to figure out a way to get him 12 touches a game, 14 maybe. And so some of that, that running scheme gets him in space. They're going to pass the ball to him some, but then they've got Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. They added Jonnu Smith, who's probably a more all around better tight end than they've had since McDaniel got there. Uh, I just and they still have Raheem Mostert, who's explosive as heck. And now that Mostert is in his dad years, he's 30s in his 30s, he's got that dad weight. So now he's a little bit more solid, maybe not quite as explosive as he was, 4 or 5 years ago, but he can take the beating a little more. So I feel like it's going to be split pretty evenly between the two of them, in part because I just don't know that we're going to have a lot of games where McDaniel runs the ball 30 times. So if they're running the ball 20 times, I could see it split in 10 and 10 between Mostert and Achane. I like him like you. I like him as an RB2. But I think when you start him, you're also going, it could be a 4 or 5.
He might be the Gabe Davis of running backs.
Yeah, it could make you sweat a little bit.
Next up, also in the third round, pick 88 overall was Tank Bigsby. Went to Jacksonville, and I think both you and I were excited about Bigsby and potential in this spot. But boy, howdy, it did not pan out. 17 games he appeared in, only got 50 carries, 132 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Averaged a somewhat woeful 2.9. yards per, only caught 1 pass for 6 yards. Dennis, that seems real bad, but there have been some theories that with Etienne going into potentially a contract year with them not likely picking up a 5th-year option, that Bigsby could have a bigger role this year and be getting groomed for 2025. Do you buy into that? Is he more of a deep bench stash, or have you just given up?
He's kind of a roster and hope guy right now. I don't think I've seen a rookie season go worse. It seemed like every time the ball was thrown to him, it bounced off his hands into an interception. And I don't know that I was hanging my hat on him catching a bunch of passes. I felt like he was decent enough in pass protection and wouldn't be a 0 or a minus in pass protection. And it just didn't pan out. He did not adjust well to the NFL. I mean, the Ernest Johnson is the epitome of a Jag and was running circles around him and just pushing him down the depth chart. I feel like it's going to be better. ETN has some skills. He showed that last year. But if I'm wrong, Bigsby's the kind of guy right now that if I'm in a rebuild, I'm probably looking to get him as a throw-in or give him away as a throw-in, depending on what I'm trying to accomplish. He's an end of the bencher, and if this is year one of your rebuild, and so you're aiming for next year's 101, he may be a guy that you want to have on your roster because he could end up being, I think timeshare is probably too strong a word, but if ETN goes down again, then maybe he is in a timeshare with Ernest Johnson. And if ETN stays relatively healthy, maybe he ends up getting 2 or 3 series a game as a change of pace, because he can't be worse than he was last year, I don't think.
I mean, you'd have to hope he can't be worse than he was last year. Next up, we have Roschon Johnson, who 4th round pick 115 overall, went to the Chicago Bears. They had Deonta Foreman, they had Khalil Herbert. How was it going to work? Johnson appeared in 15 games, only got 81 carries, 352 yards, 2 touchdowns. Not terrible, 4.3 average. Caught 34 passes for 209 yards, 40 targets. This offseason, Herbert's still there. They went out and got DeAndre Swift. I think both of us think DeAndre Swift is the best of the committee there. But with Herbert, having been up and down and probably going into his last season in Chicago, do you think it's crazy to value Johnson potentially over Herbert in Dynasty?
I think in Dynasty you have to. So Khalil Herbert is a pretty explosive runner, but he's a very, very average at best in the receiving game. and he's not terribly big. He's one of these 5'9", 205 pounders. That's okay size for a running back, but it isn't like creme de la creme. He isn't super explosive, but he's a good run. He's got good vision. He can build up speed. I like Herbert. I just, he doesn't have the draft pedigree, and so he's not a guy that is going to get handed a lot of stuff. I liked last year with Roschon being a rookie. I thought Herbert might be the guy to roster there, and in a few games he looked like it. And they made Foreman inactive and had Herbert in there. I just don't think Herbert has done enough to say I'm going to keep this number 2 job. I agree with you. I think he's probably going to be looking for a job next year. Roschon, the downside for him is that, what he's best at is something that DeAndre Swift is really good at too. So Roschon's going to have to step up the running part of being a running back. But then again, maybe the new OC in Chicago's like, you know what?
Well, it is Shane Waldron who, in Seattle had a propensity for running, but I think last year DeAndre Swift actually showed that he could step up his own game at running too. He had a lot of carries and stayed pretty healthy. He looked like a guy that could handle a 3-down load, whether you want him to or not.
And I think that's the issue, is that because historically over the course of his career, he hasn't been able to handle it. He tends to get dinged up and doesn't play through injuries very well. As good as he can look, there's always that little worry in the back of your head about is this a game where he gets a ding and it causes him to be low producing in the next 2 or 3 games. I like Roschon. I think he'll be the number 2. I think it ends up being Herbert. If they're doing the healthy scratch thing again this year with their third back, because Travis Homer plays special teams, I think Herbert's the guy getting scratched.
Next up, 5th round, 143 overall, Israel Abanikanda, who went to the New York Jets. And this looked like a horrendous landing spot post-draft because they grabbed Dalvin Cook. They had Breece Hall there coming back. They had Michael Carter. But, slowly along the way last year, while Breece Hall was what we hoped he would be, they ended up releasing Cook. They released Michael Carter. And now Abanikanda, who only appeared in 6 games last year, saw 22 carries for 70 yards. Not incredible. Also caught 7 passes for 43 yards. The Jets offense was a bit of a dumpster fire, but Abanikanda looks like he has a chance to kind of be that role player, change of pace. We don't expect Breece Hall's going to yield that much time on the field, and hopefully the Jets offense is a little better. But to me, that gives him a little bit of value. He is, an end of bench guy, maybe in the RB5-6 category.
So the thing that concerns me about Abanikanda is his little itty bitty teeny tiny hands. And so, he's not real strong catching the ball. He's got good speed. He's explosive. He showed that off last year a little bit in the return game. But I think Breece Hall is going to be a volume hog, running game and passing game. I think Breece Hall is just going to get a ton of volume. I expect they're probably going to bring in a veteran at some point. It's not going to be Dalvin Cook again, but there's going to be somebody. They're going to say, look, we need somebody. We're not going into the season with Xavier Valladay as our RB3 and Jacques Patrick is our RB4.
It's also possible they snag somebody in the draft because they have spent a lot of offseason bringing in offensive linemen, and they already had pretty good defense. It wouldn't be shocking to see them add, another passing game weapon and then take late round picks on adding some running back depth.
Abanikanda was a 5th rounder. I don't think bringing in another 5th, 6th, 7th rounder, I don't think that gives you the kind of depth you want. It should something happen to Breece Hall. I don't know that they're going to bring in a Kareem Hunt or something like that, because if you thought Cook lost a step, you should see Kareem Hunt. But there's going to be a veteran out there, and maybe they wait until cut down, and that's when they bring in a veteran, or maybe they wait until week 2 when the salary doesn't have to vest for the entire season.
Dalvin Cook's still out there, so.
But it feels like they're going to bring in a veteran to make sure, and maybe validate. Like, I kind of liked Xavier Valade coming out of college. He was a good pass catcher. He's got good size. He looked good at Arizona State. He was just, he's one of those really deep guys that I kind of will get a crush on and say, oh, if this guy just, he's like Quadri. Who was that cat out of Pitt? There was not Quadri Ishmael, but Quadri Allison. He played with. He's the guy. He put up like 1,400 yards the year James Conner missed with lymphoma. So, anyways, I think they're going to bring in some. Especially with Aaron Rodgers, they're going to bring in a veteran. Who that is, I don't know, but there'll be a veteran added to this team. Abanikanda is going to get a chance to maybe work his way in to being that veteran the next couple seasons. But I think in year 2, they may still use him on kick returns because he did a pretty good job at it. Right now, he's sitting at the RB2. I feel like week 1, he's going to be the RB3 in New York.
We shall see. Next up, another 5th round guy taken 163 overall, and that was Chase Brown. Went to the Cincinnati Bengals. Didn't have a huge impact in year 1, but we started to see him come on a little bit at the end of the year. Ended up with 44 carries for 179 yards, caught 14 passes for 156 yards and a touchdown. But they liked that spark enough that it made them comfortable to sign Zach Moss, who's kind of a journeyman role player, and move on from Joe Mixon. We figure Moss and Brown are going to be kind of in tandem, sharing that backfield. To me, I don't want to get too crazy, but I like the potential.
I love Mixon leaving for Chase Brown. I didn't like Zach Moss arriving. For whatever reason, Moss just never clicked in Buffalo the way that we thought he might. Some analysts thought he might. I know, it was Cater Michelle Magic of the Ball Blast fantasy. They loved Zach Moss,
Michelle,
and it just did not click for him in Buffalo. And so he ends up I think weren't him and Nyheim Hines basically traded even up for each other or something.
Yes.
And then Moss goes and Jonathan Taylor's out. And next thing you know, Moss looks fantastic in Indianapolis. And maybe it's the system. And so now he's going to be back in that system. Cincinnati brought Moss in to be the starter. Now, let's not get it too twisted here. Cincinnati's going to throw the ball a lot. Like Sam Howell had 612 attempts last year. It wouldn't surprise me. They signed, Trent Brown out of New England to play right tackle. It wouldn't surprise me if, Cincinnati breaks 600 passing attempts this year. It's Chase Brown is going to be the lightning to Zach Moss's thunder. Now, what's that mean? Probably at best a mid RB3. It's probably going to be a situation where the week you start him, he doesn't do much. You put him in, you take him out of your lineup, and then that week he goes off and puts up 14 points. And it seems to have frustration in 2024 written all over it.
Going back for a minute, you talked about maybe the Jets looking at free agents, made me curious. Here are probably the biggest names that are left on the unsigned on the free agent market at running back. Ezekiel Elliott, J.K. Dobbins, your boy Rashad Penny, Latavius Murray, Jerick McKinnon, Cam Akers, Damian Harris, and the one that jumped out to me that feels like they could be that role you're talking about for the Jets is Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Yeah, I think that, and Zeke Elliott showed he still has a little bit left in the tank, and I think Elliott is going to be looking for a chance to win. It's, Latavius Murray has shown that, like,
I think
he
Elliott
can-
ends up going back to Dallas.
You think Zeke goes back to Dallas?
Yeah, they've been trying to work on it, and I don't think he's going to command that much salary. And I think he and Dak are good friends. I think he liked playing there. And given their running back situation, even if they take a back in the draft, they have Rico Dowdle and Deuce Vaughn.
It looks
He'll
perfect.
play.
But it looks perfect for him.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. I think, Latavius Murray could be one of those guys that, is ready and when you need him. And if you don't need him, he can jump in a minute and he's not going to hurt you.
Going back to our class of 23, the next up, another fifth round, 172 overall. That was Eric Gray, went to the New York Giants. Only saw 17 carries for 48 yards, 2.8 yards per carry. Caught 6 passes for 22 yards. However, Saquon Barkley's no longer there. They did sign Devin Singletary, but, it feels more wide open in New York. Do you think Gray gets any kind of a shot? Is he worth a stash to you at this point?
So I think I actually just drafted him in a startup. So full transparency. Now I drafted him as like my RB5 or 6. I like Gray coming out. I think he's got some ability. He's got good size, 5'10", 211. But he did return some kicks and some punts last year in New York. Showed some versatility there. I think he's somebody that can push Devin Singletary. The issue with Singletary has always been, can he hold up? He's not he's a 5'8", 203, 5'7", 203 pound running back. So he's not terribly big. So it feels like it's going to be a split backfield. Right now, Gary Brightwell is sitting as the RB2 behind Singletary. Brightwell doesn't have the juice that Eric Gray has. What Gray is going to need to do when he gets in is not make mistakes. He's going to have to make the correct read. And a lot of times with young guys, what happens is they get in and they're like, I've got to make a play. And in trying to make a play, they lose 3 yards instead of gaining 1 yard. When the play that was available was gain the 1 yard, and they try to do something that's just not there. So we'll see. Gray looked good in college. He had some explosiveness. He was at Tennessee and Oklahoma, was productive at both schools. I think he's in a great opportunity to be a second-year breakout kind of guy. And could they bring in somebody, a rookie? Maybe. But there's not a lot of rookies in this class that are looking like they'd be day one starters. So Singletary showed really well last year. Can he keep it up again this year? I like Gray to overtake Brightwell. So for me, he's kind of a handcuff stash guy, and let's see what happens.
So I'm going to group these kind of last 4 guys together. Let me pull up the last one because all of these are probably, if you're thinking about taking them, it's only on potential of a possible opportunity. They were all 6th round selections. First up is Evan Hull. He was a 5th round, 176 overall. It looked like at one point in time he might end up being the de facto starter for the Colts. Ended up playing just a couple snaps before he got injured and missed the year. Had 1 reception for 6 yards and 1 carry for 1 yard. Chris Rodriguez went in the 6th round for the Commanders, 193 overall. Did get a little bit of run, 51 carries, 247 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's better than some of the guys above him, including Tank Bigsby. Also caught 2 for 12, but Austin Eckler's there. Brian Robinson is still there. Deuce Vaughn, we mentioned just a minute ago, wasn't really heavily involved in the Cowboys offense. Went 6th round, 212 overall, probably more of a special teamer, but had 23 carries, 40 yards. is still there with Rico Dowdle, had 7 receptions for 40 yards and did get a touchdown. And then we have Zach Evans, a trendy, late round rookie pickup because he went to the 6th round to the Rams. He was not the late round running back that broke out for the Rams last year. Only had 9 carries for 19 yards, while we saw Kyron Williams totally kind of break out and dominate. And even when Williams wasn't there, it was Darrell Henderson, Royce Freeman. But notably under Sean McVay, we've seen running backs do nothing as rookies, but that doesn't mean they can't do something in the future. So I would put all these guys in if you're keeping them, they're an end of the bench wish stream right now. But which wish stream are you most intrigued by?
So Evan Hull he's a Big Ten guy. So I got to see him probably a little more than some of these other players. Productive in college, ran a good 40 time. He just doesn't have any wiggle to him. He's a straight line guy. He feels like he's an RB3 for some team, RB3-4. He ends up playing a bunch of special teams. Preseason hero. That's kind of what Hull may grow a little more, but I just feel like he's going to be one of those guys that that if he's your starter, you're like, dang, I really not looking forward to 7 more weeks of Evan Hull. Oh well, we'll get a better draft pick next year. Rodriguez, he had a decent college career. He's a bigger guy, just not very explosive, kind of lumbering. He looked a little better when he was in for the Commanders last year, but I mean, he makes Brian Robinson look explosive. And so he's another guy that needs to have stuff happen in front of him. He's not gonna take over the passing down role from Austin Eckler. And if Eckler gets injured and Robinson pulls in, maybe Robinson moves over because he surprisingly showed to be a better receiver than I think he got credit for. I don't think we see Rodriguez take on the full Brian Robinson role either. So to me, he screams, A.J. Dillon type of backup, may have some decent games here and there. Deuce Vaughn, I think he's a career special teamer. I mean, like if you've got Deuce Vaughn on your roster, you're blowing on them dice and you're throwing them and shaking them and you're going, come on, Darren Sproles 2.0, because that's the pathway for him, is to become that explosive pass catcher. We're going to put him in space and see what he can do with 8 touches a game at 5'5" and I don't know, I think he was 175 pounds or something, 170. He's going to be a kick returner. I think he's a career special teamer. Zach Evans, though, he's got good size. He was productive in college, but he never took over a role, and he actually transferred to get away from a recruit that came in and basically took a big portion of his job. And then he went to another school where he had, I think Quinshon Judkins was there at that time. And Judkins ended up, I think he was only like a 3-star recruit coming in, took a big chunk of the work from Evans. It was just, he never could just take a job and run away with it. So there's some questions, whether it's about his desire or his vision, something. He just never could put it all together in college and be the guy. So if I have to take one of these guys, though, I'm going to take Evans because I feel like he's the unknown. He's the guy that I know the least about at an NFL level. Hull, Rodriguez, and Vaughn all feel like they have a role, and that role doesn't lead to real fantasy relevance, versus Evans, who, we could see Sean McVay run 195-pound Kyron Williams into the ground by week 10 this year, and Evans take over. And for the, at 215 pounds, he's the guy for the next 2 or 3 years. But I would be remiss if I didn't bring up some undrafted free agents.
Yeah, I think for me, I don't like really a whole bunch of those guys either, and I wouldn't be shocked too. Washington with a whole new set of coaching staff and Anthony Lynn coming in if they didn't take another back in the draft too that pushes Rodriguez further out. Evans is the only one that I was looking at, as potentially stashing too. With Hull, I might almost rather stash Trey Sermon from the Colts than Evan Hull.
Yeah, I think Sermon has a more well-rounded skill set when it comes to being a running back in the NFL. Though 3 undrafted free agents all finished higher than Evans and Vaughn and Rodriguez and Hull and Gray and Chase Brown and Izzy Abanikanda and Tank Bigsby and Kendre Miller. So Jaleel McLaughlin, Amari DiMercato, and Keaton Mitchell. So McLaughlin was RB 44. You're the Denver guy. Where does he stand with he had a couple hot games and then he really faded. He was a small
I honestly wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't make the team.
As I say, he was a small college workhorse back. He finished his RB 44. But he's got P. Ryan, who gets too many touches ahead of him, and Javonte Williams.
P. Ryan's a better runner, better back, better pass catcher, better blocker. I actually think he's a better runner too. A lot of their little plays that they tried with Jaleel McLaughlin were a joke down the stretch. I mean, I just knew Denver was screwed if they put him on the field down the stretch. And I think there's a lot of feeling he may not make the roster. And Keaton Mitchell, I don't think we're going to see him in 24 thanks to he blew his knee out in December.
Yeah. But is Mitchell a guy that you may want to stash and hold?
Yeah, because you probably still IR stash him for a bunch of the year.
Because he's gonna end up, he showed he was like, dollar store Devin Achane and really explosive, few touches. If he can come back and provide that role, maybe not in 24, but in 2025. What's Derrick Henry really have left in the tank? Is Mitchell going to be able to outperform Justice Hill? If Mitchell doesn't really play this year, is Justice Hill even going to be there next year? So, and then Amari DiMercato, I liked him, and then they went and signed Michael Carter, and I feel like Michael Carter is better, but they also didn't they sign the Cardinals sign a free agent this offseason too?
Yeah, let me look at there.
And they've still got Connor, and Connor had a great year last year. They signed DJ Dallas. He's a special teamer. So
I wouldn't be surprised if they end up taking somebody in the draft either. DJ Dallas, Michael Carter. They also have Tony Jones.
Yeah, I don't think Jones is a practice squad guy. He'll bounce back.
I mean, of the 3 of those guys you mentioned, DiMercato might have the best shot at touches because Arizona's depth chart is thin. Jaleel McLaughlin was like a fun story for people last year, but when Denver had Philip Lindsay, I was snatching him up in the preseason everywhere. I put him on every roster I had. I never went and got Jaleel McLaughlin last year. And if there's people that are still high on him, I would be happy to let them have him or to trade him for picks.
Yeah, I don't disagree much. I like Mitchell as a stash. I agree with you. I think DiMercato has the
Mitchell's a bummer just because he got hurt, but then also now they have Derrick Henry, which feels like that's going to be more. Some of the appeal to me of Mitchell was he's a fun, explosive guy. When you have more of a committee where you have a Gus Edwards and a Justice Hill, you can see him playing in there. But now it probably takes him a while to get back. And Derrick Henry is a whole different kind of running back that suggests, you're just going to try to obliterate defenses in front of you. It's not a bad strategy for Baltimore. It just feels a little bit different. I might get more excited about Keaton Mitchell going into 25 when presumably he'll be healthy. Derrick Henry, I think, only signed a 2-year deal.
Yeah.
And maybe there's greater opportunity. But with that little draft capital and, only seeing him, there's also a chance that, we've seen the best of him. So that's a bad break because I think of the injury and the situation. Well, that'll do it for today. We'll be Dennis and Matt will be back on Tuesday looking at pass catchers from the class of 23. I will be out, but then I will be back next Friday. We are going to start looking at our dynasty rankings, post free agency, pre rookies coming in the draft. So this is kind of a trendy time for startups. So we'll go through a lot of that. And then the week before the draft, we'll be doing our rookie rankings and doing some fun rookie mocks to see how we're feeling going into the draft when the draft obliterates all of our hopes, dreams, and expectations for just about everything. So some things to look forward to as we turn the corner ending March and moving towards April, getting ever closer to some of the OTAs, some of the fun training camps, the season feeling like it's ever closer now, Dennis. But it isn't here yet, and neither is the Spring Football League, which, I think they really missed a window waiting till the end of March to kick off. But that could leave you, if your March Madness bracket's already in tatters and you need something to, fill the sadness in your mind. Dennis, what can the people do?
They can go over to their favorite podcast platform. And if that platform is Google Podcasts, you should be starting to move over to another one because they're getting ready to shut that down. But give us a like and a subscribe. Leave us a rating and a review. We love that. We want to break into the top 100 in Czechoslovakia.
I know we've already gotten the English-speaking countries. Let's get the ones that don't really know what we're saying. I think we would thrive there more, don't you?
I concur. I think those are the people that get us.
Well, I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend, Dennis. I hope you at least get a nap in between some of these kitchen renovation projects. I can't wait to hear the update.
I just want it to be over.
I mean, that sounds good too. Well, you guys have a wonderful weekend, and we will see you again on Tuesday.